In 2017, Bombardier sold the majority stake in its cutting-edge aircraft program, worth billions of dollars. The price? $1 Canadian. This wasn't charity, it was revenge. You see, in the mid-2000s, a small Canadian manufacturer, Bombardier, built a jet that Boeing never took seriously. When Bombardier quietly offered Boeing a majority stake in the struggling C-Series program, Boeing walked away. For Boeing, it was just a niche airplane, an oversized regional jet, nothing to worry about. But things changed when Delta ordered 75 of them. Suddenly, this insignificant jet was landing in Boeing's own backyard. However, instead of negotiating, Boeing went to war. They filed a trade complaint, weaponized the US government, and secured nearly 300% tariffs, effectively banning the C-Series from America. The message was clear: challenge Boeing and we'll crush you. But Boeing made one fatal mistake. They assumed Bombardier had nowhere else to go. What happened next blindsided them. Bombardier found a partner Boeing never expected, cut a $1 deal, and turned this dead airplane into one of Boeing's biggest nightmares. This is the story of how Boeing tried to destroy Bombardier but failed miserably. The year was 2006. Boeing decided to discontinue its 717, and McDonnell Douglas's MD-80 series was fading into obsolescence. Airlines worldwide were desperate for efficient aircraft that could serve routes with 100 to 150 passengers, but the industry giants had essentially abandoned this segment. Instead, Airbus and Boeing offered what the industry calls shrinks, shortened versions of their larger A320 and 737 models. These shrinks carried a fundamental design flaw. When Airbus and Boeing shortened the A320 and 737 to create smaller variants, they created aircraft that retained the structural weight and oversized wings of their larger siblings, design characteristics that made their operating costs painfully high. The physics simply didn't work in their favor. Airlines were forced to operate planes that were inefficient for their mission profile, burning excess fuel and generating higher maintenance costs than necessary. The sales of these smaller variants weren't great either. As a result, both manufacturers seemed to accept that this market segment simply wasn't worth the investment. But where Boeing and Airbus saw an unprofitable niche, Bombardier saw opportunity. Hundreds of airports, particularly in North America, depended on aircraft in this size category for their connectivity. Regional carriers like Embraer had proven there was substantial demand, selling nearly 1,500 of their E-Jet family. The market wasn't the problem, the product was. For Bombardier, this represented more than just a business opportunity. It was a chance to transform the company from a regional jet manufacturer into a serious player in commercial aviation. The Canadian government, recognizing the strategic importance of maintaining a domestic aerospace industry, was prepared to support this ambition. Canada's vast geography and numerous remote communities created a legitimate national interest in developing efficient aircraft capable of serving smaller airports across long distances. As a result, Bombardier envisioned an aircraft that would revolutionize this neglected segment. A clean sheet design that would leverage modern materials, advanced aerodynamics, and next-generation engines to deliver efficiency gains that shrunk versions of larger jets could never match. So, in 2008, Bombardier launched the C-Series program with initial development cost estimates around $2 billion. But what Bombardier didn't fully appreciate at the time was just how challenging this undertaking would be, or how threatened Boeing would eventually feel. From Boeing's perspective, the C-Series didn't register as a competitive threat. Their analysis of the market led them to a conclusion that would prove catastrophically wrong. They believed the C-Series was essentially an oversized regional jet that would compete primarily with Embraer's E-Jet family, not with Boeing's own product line. This assessment wasn't entirely unreasonable on the surface. Bombardier was known for regional jets like the CRJ series. The C-Series, with its smaller capacity, seemed to fit that category. Boeing's strategic thinking assumed that airlines operating aging Boeing 717s and MD-80s would naturally upgauge to larger, more efficient aircraft like the 737 MAX 7. With better fuel economy, the MAX 7 would offer lower trip costs even with more seats, making it the logical replacement. However, Boeing fundamentally misunderstood Bombardier's design philosophy. The C-Series wasn't conceived as a regional jet at all. It was a fully capable single-aisle medium-haul airliner, specifically engineered to address the world's unique operational requirements: long distances, remote airports, shorter runways, and challenging infrastructure constraints. The larger CS300 variant boasted a range of 3,600 nautical miles, essentially matching the range of the 737 MAX and A320neo families. By no means was this a regional jet. It was a scalable platform with the potential to challenge Boeing's most important product. But when Bombardier initially approached Boeing about a potential collaboration on the C-Series program, Boeing declined. The company saw no value in partnering with what it perceived as a struggling competitor building an inferior product. This intelligence failure was compounded by Boeing's dismissive attitude toward Bombardier's capabilities. Undeterred, Bombardier was confident in their capabilities and went ahead with the program anyway. Yet, its ambition to create a market-disrupting aircraft confronted the harsh realities of modern aircraft development. The program quickly spiraled beyond its original scope and budget. Development costs escalated from the initial $2 billion estimate to over $7 billion by the time the aircraft entered service. Technical challenges mounted, timelines slipped, and financial pressures intensified. The Canadian federal government and the Quebec provincial government recognized that losing the C-Series would devastate Canada's aerospace sector. They intervened with substantial financial support, a combination of equity investments and interest-free loans totaling over $1 billion. This government backing kept the program alive, but it also became the catalyst for what was yet to come. Soon, in September 2013, the C-Series finally took to the skies for its maiden flight. Bombardier was adamant that the aircraft would enter commercial service within a year. Then, disaster struck. During routine ground testing at the Miserably manufacturing facility, one of the test aircraft suffered an uncontained engine failure. The incident not only delayed the certification timeline, but also forced Bombardier to withdraw from the Farnborough Air Show, the industry's most important biennial trade event, where they had expected to secure crucial orders. The setback was devastating. Some analysts questioned whether the program would survive, but Bombardier's resilience helped the company navigate through the problems, and after years of delay, Swiss International Airlines became the first operator of the C-Series in 2016, followed by Air Baltic and Korean Air. Early operators praised the aircraft enthusiastically. Airlines appreciated its efficiency and versatility. The technical specifications vindicated Bombardier's design philosophy. The aircraft delivered a 20% reduction in fuel burn per seat and 15% lower operating costs compared to competing aircraft. It even outperformed the newer 737 MAX and A320neo in efficiency metrics. By October 2017, 14 C-Series aircraft were in operation with Swiss and Air Baltic. At the time, the order book showed nearly 350 firm orders, theoretically enough to make the program profitable, but there was a critical weakness. Bombardier lacked validation from major American carriers, which would have significantly strengthened its position in the commercial aviation market. Bombardier understood that penetrating the American market was existential for the C-Series program. They needed a marquee US customer to prove the aircraft's viability and unlock orders from other carriers. So when Delta Airlines expressed interest, Bombardier was prepared to do whatever it took to secure the deal. On April 28, 2016, Delta announced a firm order for 75 CS-100 aircraft, with options for 50 more. It was the breakthrough Bombardier desperately needed. To secure the deal, Bombardier offered the planes at a massive discount, essentially at just $19.6 million each, roughly 41% below the estimated production cost of $33 million, essentially accepting massive upfront losses to establish a strategic foothold in the US market. For Bombardier, this was a calculated gamble. Delta's endorsement would legitimize the C-Series globally and potentially open floodgates for additional orders. For Boeing, it was an alarm bell. The Delta order represented something far more threatening than a single lost sale. It established a dangerous precedent. If Delta successfully operated the C-Series, other major US carriers would inevitably follow. Boeing's vice chairman stated bluntly that losing just one or two additional US customer sales would make the MAX 7 economically unviable. So Boeing responded swiftly and ruthlessly. Exactly 1 year after the Delta announcement, Boeing filed a formal trade complaint with the US Department of Commerce. The petition alleged 2 violations: illegal subsidies from the Canadian government and predatory pricing through dumping below production cost. Boeing demanded punitive tariffs to neutralize the C-Series in the American market. But the irony was staggering. Boeing claimed Canadian government subsidies gave Bombardier an unfair advantage, while Boeing itself had received over $14 billion in tax breaks and subsidies from the US state and federal governments over the previous 2 decades. Boeing also claimed the C-Series threatened sales of the 737 MAX 7, even though Delta had explicitly stated they weren't interested in the 737. In fact, the 2 aircraft weren't even directly comparable. Nevertheless, Boeing pressed forward with the complaint, and in September 2017, the US Department of Commerce delivered a devastating preliminary ruling: combined tariffs of nearly 300% on every C-Series aircraft. With the preliminary tariffs in place, Bombardier faced an existential crisis. The company's financial situation was already precarious. Now, access to the world's largest aviation market appeared closed. Desperate, Bombardier and the Canadian government made one final attempt to salvage the situation through the very company that had attacked them. High-level discussions commenced between Bombardier, Boeing, and Canadian government officials about a potential partnership. The framework would have given Boeing an ownership stake in the C-Series program, essentially absorbing the aircraft into Boeing's product portfolio. It was a lifeline that could have resolved the trade dispute while providing Boeing with a ready-made modern aircraft in a market segment where they had no competitive offering. Then, inexplicably, Boeing unilaterally terminated the discussions. The company chose to press forward with its trade complaint rather than negotiate a partnership. It was a decision that defies logic and one that Boeing would come to deeply regret. With Boeing refusing to negotiate, Bombardier had only one remaining option: Airbus. Unlike Boeing, Airbus had recognized the C-Series for what it actually was: an excellent modern aircraft with significant market potential. Airbus had held exploratory discussions with Bombardier about potential collaboration before Boeing filed its trade complaint. Now, with Boeing's aggression threatening the program's very existence, those discussions accelerated dramatically. On October 16, 2017, just weeks after the preliminary tariff announcement, Airbus and Bombardier unveiled a partnership that stunned the aerospace industry. Airbus would acquire a 50.1% controlling stake in the C-Series program. The price? $1 Canadian. Airbus contributed no cash and assumed none of the program's debt. Bombardier would even continue funding the program's shortfalls, committing up to $350 million for 2018. A company on the brink of bankruptcy was effectively paying to give away its crown jewel. But the deal contained a strategic masterstroke that would neutralize Boeing's tariffs. Airbus announced it would establish a second C-Series assembly line at its existing facility in Mobile, Alabama. Aircraft assembled in the United States wouldn't be subject to import duties. The C-Series would become an American-made aircraft, rendering Boeing's trade complaint largely irrelevant. Then came the final humiliation for Boeing. In January 2018, the US International Trade Commission delivered its final ruling on the case. The vote was unanimous, 4-0 in favor of Bombardier. The Commission threw out the tariffs entirely. The ITC's reasoning devastated Boeing's argument. The Commission found that Boeing hadn't actually lost the Delta sale because Boeing hadn't truly competed for it. Delta's testimony confirmed that Boeing's offer consisted primarily of used out-of-production 717s and used Embraer jets, not new 737 MAX 7 aircraft. The Commission concluded the MAX 7 was a substantially different aircraft serving a different market segment. The logic was irrefutable. If Boeing didn't lose a sale, it couldn't claim injury from that sale. But things were about to get worse for Boeing. You see, Boeing's miscalculation created consequences that extended far beyond the courtroom. The Canadian government, outraged by Boeing's actions, swiftly cancelled a planned multi-billion-dollar procurement of Boeing's FA-18 Super Hornet fighter jets. Before the trade dispute, Boeing's Super Hornet was considered the favourite for Canada's fighter replacement program. The Lockheed Martin F-35 was viewed as too expensive, but after Boeing's attack on a program that had become a matter of Canadian national pride, government officials made clear they would not award contracts to companies that harmed Canada's strategic interests. Canada ultimately selected the F-35, a decision that cost Boeing billions in potential defence revenue. The British government, concerned about thousands of jobs at the Belfast facility where C-Series wings were manufactured, also issued public warnings to Boeing about future defence contracts. Boeing's trade war had created geopolitical fallout that extended well beyond commercial aviation. But the greatest cost was strategic. Boeing had multiple opportunities to acquire or partner on the C-Series, but Boeing walked away every time. If Boeing had acquired the C-Series, the benefits would have been transformative. Boeing could have rebranded it as the 797, filling the gap below the 737 MAX. The poorly selling MAX 7 could have been quietly discontinued, with the C-Series absorbing that market segment. Later, the stretched CS500 variant could have replaced the 737 MAX 8 when that aircraft eventually reached the end of its life cycle. Boeing would have gained a modern, efficient platform that required minimal additional development investment, freeing resources to focus on the new mid-market airplane that would fill the gap between the 737 and 787. Boeing's supply chain integration would have been straightforward. The C-Series was a North American aircraft with a North American supply chain. Even the wings, manufactured in Belfast, were produced by Spirit Aerosystems, already a key Boeing supplier. The operational synergies were obvious. Instead, these advantages went to Airbus. So in a bid to tackle the Airbus-Bombardier partnership, in December 2017, Boeing announced plans for a $4.2 billion partnership with Brazilian manufacturer Embraer, whose E-Jet E2 family was the A220's primary competitor. The deal would have given Boeing control over Embraer's commercial aviation division, creating a competitor to the Airbus A220. Boeing's problems were about to get exponentially worse. In October 2018, a brand new 737 MAX 8 belonging to Lion Air crashed, followed by another crash 5 months later. The financial and reputational damage was catastrophic. Boeing faced billions in compensation payments, lost sales, production disruptions, and legal settlements. The company's resources and management attention were completely consumed by the crisis, and any remaining bandwidth for strategic initiatives evaporated. As a result, executing the Embraer deal became impossible. When Boeing unilaterally terminated the agreement in April 2020, Embraer publicly accused Boeing of fabricating pretexts to escape contractual obligations because of Boeing's deteriorating financial condition. Boeing had no choice but to pay Embraer a $150 million settlement. This failed deal left Boeing completely checkmated, with no competitive response to the A220 and no viable path forward in the small single-aisle segment. Under Airbus's stewardship, the renamed A220 transformed from a struggling program into a commercial success. The Airbus brand provided the market confidence and long-term viability assurance that Bombardier could never offer. Sales accelerated dramatically. During the decade Bombardier controlled the program, approximately 400 firm orders were secured. Since the Airbus acquisition, total net orders have surged past 900 aircraft, with a backlog approaching 500. Major carriers that hesitated to commit to Bombardier quickly signed with Airbus. JetBlue ordered 100 aircraft for fleet replacement. Air France ordered 60 for short-haul modernization. Qantas selected the A220 for regional renewal. Delta repeatedly expanded its commitment, reaching 145 aircraft, making it the A220's largest customer. Airbus is now ramping production to 14 aircraft per month by 2026, a rate that would have been unthinkable under Bombardier. The aircraft is increasingly popular with airlines seeking efficiency for routes that don't require larger narrow-body capacity. For Boeing, watching the A220's success is particularly painful because it represents everything the company could have had. Airbus gained a modern, efficient aircraft in a crucial market segment without spending billions on development. Currently, Boeing has no viable aircraft in the small single-aisle segment to challenge the A220. Considering the current controversies and delays, there is no realistic path to develop one quickly. Boeing's campaign against Bombardier represents one of the most spectacular strategic miscalculations in modern aerospace history. The company that started this saga trying to eliminate a competitive threat ended up creating a far more dangerous competitor backed by a rival with vastly superior resources. Perhaps most importantly, Boeing's actions revealed a corporate culture that prioritized short-term competitive tactics over long-term strategic thinking. The same culture that chose legal warfare over innovation would later prioritize schedules and costs over safety in the 737 MAX development, with tragic consequences.